NutriCast. Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Build a routine with Ollie that supports your wellness needs, like getting your daily vitamins and minerals with Ollie's multi-gummies, or keeping your mood upbeat with all the vitamin D in Hello Happy. Give your gut health some support with probiotics, and wake up feeling refreshed after taking Ollie Sleep. Do wellness on your terms. Find Ollie at a Walmart or Target near you or at ollie.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Welcome to Her Extraordinary Life by Design, where we celebrate women who are shaping their lives one extraordinary day at a time. I'm your host, Leslie Gaudet, self-care coach for women who are ready to make self-care a priority to support them in life and business. Every week, I'll be speaking with inspiring women from various walks of life who will share their personal journeys and will discover how they have fearlessly carved their own paths as business owners, passionately pursuing their dreams and creating a meaningful impact on their communities. So let's get started. Hello, and welcome to Her Extraordinary Life by Design podcast. I'm your host, Leslie Gaudet, and today we're talking with Jamie Buzzelle. Jamie is a certified parenting coach. She specializes in empowering parents to seek connection and collaboration with their children, which promotes healthier relationships and preserves the natural parent-child bond while maintaining a healthy attachment. Parents who work with Jamie will notice deeper connections with their children, a reduction in yelling and power struggles, as well as dramatic improvements to problematic behaviors. I absolutely love that, and I'm really excited that you're here today. Welcome, Jamie, to the show.
Hi, Leslie. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. Well, when we first connected over a coffee chat, wow, this feels like ages ago.
I know.
We discussed how your work, I felt, perfectly aligns with this series on personal development and growth, because my goal really for 2025 is to empower women right from the beginning of the year, right to the end with purpose. And, again, also throughout the year to really help build on that and help them to thrive like the whole year and beyond that. And so I love how your work can really, especially, and not only just inspire moms. I feel like you can inspire women in general, but because of what you do, I really feel like it can really inspire moms. So what you do, I believe, goes beyond parenting because you're helping women embrace that personal growth aspect in ways that positively impact both themselves and their children, fostering healthier, more connected relationships. Yes. And so with that in mind, I would just love to dive right into what you do and how it supports this journey.
Yeah. So probably the best way to kind of talk about this first is like how I ended up here. And so the reason why I chose parent coaching is because I think there's a huge gap. I think that you get this little baby when you go home from the hospital and the nurses and the doctors are like, best of luck to you. And that's kind of it. And there's this kind of joke, but it's not really a joke because it's true that there's no manual for how to raise a child. And what I found when I had my son was, the first couple of years, you're just immersed in everything that's new about parenting. And you're getting overwhelmed with advice, whether it's from your friends or your family or social media or the books that you may purchase. And I was no different. I was totally overwhelmed. And I had my own postpartum issues and depression and anxiety and feeling like I needed to control what I could control to have a sense of something because there was so much outside of my control. And when my son started to be a toddler and actually have like that awareness that he is his own human being and started to push back on, boundaries and do the things that toddlers do, I really struggled because the advice that I was being given by people around me and friends that had older kids, so they had already gone through the toddler stage, was, put them in timeout, put the hot sauce in their mouth for back talk. It works. And so, I cringe when I think about some of the things that I did, and not in like a shame way, but more just like in I know better, so I do better. And what I ended up doing was recognizing that while my little boy was in his diaper, sitting on the stairs in timeout crying, that there was nothing that he was learning. And that really resonated for me. I just remember looking at my husband one day and I'm like, what is he learning? He's just sitting there crying. And as soon as he'd come off the stairs, the behavior would inevitably repeat. And so what ended up happening for me is I sought out coaching. I didn't actually even know that there was such a thing as a parenting coach, but in my kind of, I'm a data girl. And so I'm constantly like looking up data, reading things. I had all these parenting books. And so I had a lot of information at my fingertips, but nothing was moving the needle. And through some of social media and just how the algorithms work, I ended up coming across a program that was parent-centric coaching. And so I sought it out and I started getting coached. And very quickly, it became not only something that was shifting how I was parenting, but it was shifting how I was communicating, like with my husband. It was shifting how I was communicating with my friends. It was shifting how I was showing up for myself. I was learning about boundaries. I was learning about the brain. I was learning about all these things that really were shifting everything in terms of just me. And I looked at my husband one day and I was like, I want to be a coach. Like, I have to do this for other people. Like, this has to be something that the world needs to know about. How is this not a thing that we're all doing? Why aren't parents being given a coach the day they go home from the hospital? Like, to me now, looking back, you should be assigned a parenting coach the moment you're sent home from the hospital. And it makes perfect sense to me in retrospect, because think about it. We have fitness coaches, business coaches, relationship coaches, mindset coaches. The best athletes in the world have 10 coaches around them, making them be the best version of themselves. But with parenting, which is arguably the hardest, most important job you will ever do, the most important role you will ever have in your life, you don't have any support except for the support of people around you who may have trauma. You may have your own trauma. You may have experiences that are shaping how you're parenting your child. You may be repeating patterns that you don't want to repeat, but you don't know how to get out of it. And so that was my experience. I did have a lot of patterns that I didn't recognize I was repeating from my own childhood that I don't want to repeat. And so that's a really long-winded answer, but I think it's important because there's so much that goes into parenting that we are unconsciously aware of. And those are the things that became incredibly apparent to me through my own journey with coaching. And the beauty is that actually my husband was incredibly resistant to it. And he was like, I don't know. I think kids need to know who's boss. And I think kids need to know that we're their parent. He was very traditional, and he was supportive of me getting coached. But he saw how my son responded to me. He saw how the relationship blossomed between my son and I, and that my son's behaviors were naturally starting to dissipate when I was responding to him in a different way. And he actually came to me one day, my husband, and said, do you think I should get coached? Like, this is really changing. And I think I was wrong. And he got coached from another coach because it wasn't going to be me. I don't advise any spouse to coach their spouse. So he actually got coached from another coach from the same program, and it changed his whole perspective on parenting as well. And so, yeah, now we're both aligned on it. But, my husband took a little bit of a different journey, and it took a little bit longer for him. So that's what got me to where I am today. And I look back on the mom that I was prior, and I don't recognize her in a lot of ways. But I'm grateful for it because it's, got me to where I am today, where I can help parents and spread the word that you don't have to yell, you don't have to punish, and you can have like a very connected, relationship centric kind of, I guess, connected relationship with your children that isn't based in punishments and yelling, and still have your kids respect your boundaries, respect your authority, but it's not from a power position. And that's really, I think, what matters, because we want our kids as they grow up to not fear us. We want them to come to us with the serious stuff as they get older. And so to me, that's what we're doing. We're laying groundwork. We're setting them up to feel safe. We're setting them up to have those skills that they need when they get older. And that's what I want every parent to know that they can do, and that is possible.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I think both of you have like the idea, like your husband was saying, well, they need to know who's boss. They need to know who's in charge. I get that because they still do need that guidance. But you realized and recognized that there was a different better way and
Sure.
your child was responding to it. But we're not taught that. We learn just as we go.
Right.
And that's just how it is. I mean, I'm not a parent. I've never been a parent, but I understand when I see my friends, people that I meet who are parents. And, it isn't an easy job because not only are they learning from you, but when they get out that door and they're in school, they're around their friends, they're around other people, they're also learning from them. And so when you can have that really strong bond with them in your home, and you can talk to them about even what they're learning out there to help them to be making better decisions. So I really love that. So yeah, I wanted to talk about personal growth because I know
Sure.
that it can play a role in developing and sustaining the connection. So
Yeah.
how do you see that working out?
So much of how kids learn is through modeling. And so, we can sit down and have these like kind of the more you grow moments. Like, I don't know if you remember growing up, like those, those commercials that would come on and it was like, the more you know. And that's shown a lot in TV shows where parents sit down with their kids and they have these like really meaningful discussions and the kid walks away with like this new idea about life. And truly in reality, very rarely do those conversations actually work. What ends up moving the needle for children is modeling behavior. And what I mean by modeling is if you want your child to be kind, you have to be kind to them first. If you want them to be respectful, you have to show them respect. If you want them to be using manners, use manners with them. Anything that you want to see in your child, it must be consistently modeled to them. If they are not being shown that, they don't have any reason to be doing it, right? Like they are mirrors up against what we are doing for them. And in the brain, there's actually a lot of research that shows there's what's called mirror neurons. And so what we do is we are doing things that then these neurons are firing in the brains and they're mirroring back what they see. So the more that you do things to model what you want to see in your children, the more they are going to mirror it back to you as they grow up. So if anything that you want to do to grow, you're going to see in your children. So, taking care of yourself, self-care, modeling what it looks like to have a boundary is a form of personal growth, right? So one of the things that I talk about a lot is we put a lot of pressure on children to change their behavior so that we can feel more comfortable. And this is something that can be kind of controversial when you first hear it because you're like, wait, what? What does that mean? And what I mean by that is take a 4-year-old child. They have a 4-year-old brain and they don't have reasoning. They don't have logic. They don't have the ability to foresee consequences. They don't have the ability to have any impulse control. So when they're making a lot of noise and they're doing the things that they're doing, they're coming from a 4-year-old brain that doesn't have any of the sophistication and ability to think the way that a 34-year-old thinks. And that brain takes until about 25 years old to fully develop. So if you have a loud child at 4 that is making a bunch of noise and you're like, hey, buddy, you're being super loud right now and I need you to be quiet. That child likely is not going to be able to follow that direction. And it's because of all of the things that I just told you. They're really just unable to control that impulse. So what ends up happening is that parent says, hey, I need you to be quiet. I've asked you now twice. Please be quiet. And the kid keeps doing it. Please be quiet. I need you to be quiet. Please stop. Please stop. That turns into a power struggle. Now you're angry because you are believing that your child is willfully defiant. They are choosing to ignore your direction and you're angry. When in reality, developmentally, they're not able to follow that direction. So you have choices as a parent. This is where you are modeling growth for yourself around how you choose to respond. This is where boundaries are really important. So I would tell a parent in this situation, this is where you take ownership of your own need for silence and you say, hey, this is getting super loud for me. I'm going to take a second and go in the other room and I'm just going to take a minute because mommy does not like noise. If you can't be quiet for mommy for a few minutes because I just need it to be more quiet, I'm going to go in the other room and close the door for a minute. I'll come back in and check on you. And a lot of times what ends up happening in that moment is the child then recognizes like, oh, okay, well, mommy's going to go away for a second. And that's different than like alienation because you're communicating a need to your child that's different than just be quiet. You're communicating a boundary. If you can't follow this for mommy, I need to step away for a second. You're owning what your need is and you're walking away. And a lot of times the child will then get back into a place of like, okay, I'm hearing what mommy's saying. Maybe they can do it. Maybe they can't. that's okay. But you have put them in a different state of mind at that point. And if they still can't control it, mommy takes a second. And at that point, sometimes you can take a minute, you regulate yourself, and then you come back in, and then you can handle whatever's going on. You can distract them. You can move on to a different activity that maybe quiets them down. You can get them outside. There's other opportunities to redirect that energy, but staying in what is and not owning that what you need in that moment is for you to take yourself out of that situation to change that dynamic rather than putting it on the 4-year-old with the dysregulation is really what the issue is at that point. And that is modeling, I think, personal development, because you are recognizing that your child is not capable of the direction that you're giving them, because developmentally they can't at 4 years old. Now, if you have a 14-year-old, that's different, right? Their brain is a little bit more developed. They still have impulse control, but you have a different set of tools for a 14-year-old than you would a 4-year-old. So then the conversation is different at 14. And again, you're modeling those boundaries. Hey, I asked you to turn the music down. If you can't turn the music down, I'm going to have to come in and turn it off for you. That's not a power struggle. That's just, this is my authority. This is my home. I've asked you twice. If you need to put headphones on so you can hear your music, great. But what I need is for this to happen this way. And if you can't listen, I need to intervene and help you out. And to me, that's really what we're doing, is that we're owning our side of something rather than putting all of the power and responsibility on our children.
Yeah. And I think, and also we have to understand, especially if it is a 4-year-old, when you think about it, our prefrontal cortex does not finish developing until we're like 25 years old. So it's a long way to go, right?
Yeah.
So, and we're learning.
Yeah. And the prefrontal cortex doesn't even come on board until 6 or 7. So at 4, they are only in their emotional brain, and they only have emotions. So truly, I mean, you'll hear this a lot, like, for 4 years old, they should really understand it. Well, it's actually not a question of understanding it. They do understand directions. I mean, yes, they can hear the language. And in theory, they can hear, hey, you're being super loud. I need you to be quiet. But that's literally like an input. They cannot have any sort of ability to logically then take that to the next step of what that entails in the brain to process it to, oh, body, stop what you're doing. Stop making the noise. Those are very sophisticated steps in the brain that people just don't understand, that developmentally is not there yet for a 4-year-old. You will see it, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be able to do it every single time consistently. So it's accepting what is and then pivoting to say, okay, this is what I need. This is what my child is capable of. Where do we meet in the middle? And that move from being an adversary of your child or being authoritarian to, okay, I need to work within their abilities, I think is very much, to me, it grew me in so many different ways to understanding. I have so much more compassion and understanding and patience, which, how is that not personal growth? Like, it gives me patience and understanding with everybody around me. Like, even when I'm driving, I'm less impatient because I'm like, I don't know what they're going through. Maybe they're rushing to the hospital. Maybe they just got really bad news at work. Like, it always, if you can recognize that people have limitations, people have something going on at all times, it gives us that compassion and that patience to pause and say, okay, what can I control? What can I do about myself in this moment? And it's no different with children than it is with other human beings that you come in contact with every day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're all going through a human experience. And so I love how you said that, just recognizing that. So in your coaching, getting back to self-improvement, let's talk about that. What do you recommend for parents to prioritize their personal growth? Because it's important that they also, as I know, I have a lot of friends, it was all about the kids up until the kids were, and even when they go through the later years, it still is about the kids until they're out of the home and they become then the empty nesters. But in doing so, how can working on themselves lead to more positive, connected family environment?
I think it's about definitely prioritizing yourself. And that's going to be different for everybody. And listen, I also think that some of this is privilege. And so you have to recognize that not everybody has the same privilege. And so I'm not going to sit here and say, work on self-care, go get that massage. Like, that's not fair. And that's very much an inequitable thing to say to an audience where I don't know. Some people work 3 jobs just to put food on the table. So I'm not going to say that. What I'm going to say is maybe your version of self-care is that you come into the house and it's crazy. And maybe you work 2 jobs that day, or you took a double shift and it's overwhelming. And so maybe your version of self-care is that you come in the house and you give your kids a hug and a kiss. And then you say, you know what, I need like 20 minutes to myself. And if you are able to do that because your kids are at an age where you can do that, and that's your self-care for the day, amazing. If that's all you can do. So truly, it has to vary based on what your needs are, because those things matter. And every single family situation is going to be different. But I will say that prioritizing yourself is something that I think is really important, because you're modeling this for your children. If all you're doing is pouring into your kids constantly and sacrificing yourself, you are showing your kids that you come last in every situation. And they may not notice that at first, like when they're really young, but as they get older, they start to see this, and then they start to think that the world does revolve around them. And then where is the lesson in terms of, well, I'm self-sufficient, I can do these things. So even like I have a 7-year-old as an example. And, I think one of his love languages, like, that book, like the 5 love languages, I think that one of his love languages is acts of service. So he does like to be taken care of, and he loves it. Like if I pop him popcorn, but he's very capable of popping his own popcorn at this point, right? So I try and balance the acts of service that he does love, because it gives him a sense of comfort and care with, buddy, you are capable of doing this stuff. So like, I may bring him his dinner plate, but then he needs to bring that plate to the dishwasher himself. Or I may pop his popcorn sometimes, but other times he needs to do it himself. Like, we're constantly reminding him that he is capable of doing things himself. That's, to me, also an act of self-care, because we don't need to continuously just constantly cater to our children as they get older. Modeling boundaries. Listen, the noise level in here is too loud. Again, going back to that example, this is getting out of control. I actually do this. As I've gotten older, I've noticed that I have a very low tolerance for noise. Like, I have a dog, 2 cats, a 7-year-old that's loud. My husband's loud. He's got ADHD. He likes to tap. He plays the drums. There could be a lot of noise in my house. And I'm an only child, and I actually like my alone time. I get to a point sometimes where I'm like, y'all, I need some time. I need a minute. It's too much. And for years, I wasn't even able to recognize that. But the fact that I can identify it, say it, speak it out loud, and have that ability to declare what I need, my son actually now at 7 will say, guys, I need some alone time. And I'm like, I never would have had that language and the ability to speak that at 7 years old, even though when I was 7, I was that way too. But I didn't have that language. I didn't have that ability to know that want and need and desire. And I believe it's because we model that for him. We put names to feelings. We work with him on his emotional regulation and teaching him how to identify his feelings. So now he's able to come home from school. He's expressed, like, when he gets off the bus, there's been so much noise all day at school, so much noise on the bus. Sometimes he needs 30 minutes to himself. Great. I love that you can identify that, and it helps him regulate. And then he's in a lot better mood after 30 minutes. Whereas before, he'd be super grumpy. So it's doing these things are teaching him, laying this groundwork that he now can identify, this is what I need. And it's because we do it with him too. We model that for him. So these are ways that we can show our kids that we prioritize ourselves, that we take care of ourselves. If you're married and you can financially afford it, if you can do a date night, great. If you can't and you need to stay home, you can't afford a sitter, I totally get that. I have been in those positions too. If you can do a date night when your kids go to bed at home, try and do something like that to connect with your spouse or your partner. Again, I don't ever want to be alienating to people that financially there's issues there. So it's finding ways to do things to take care of yourself that make sense for whatever situation you're in. It's just making sure that you're honoring your needs as well. Because I hear so often when moms become moms, especially, this is not nearly as common with dads, they lose themselves. And it takes years to recognize that being a mother, yes, it is part of your identity, but it's not your whole identity. but it takes a long time to incorporate that new identity into who you were before. And I feel like even just in the last like year or two, I'm starting to get back to like who Jamie was before I became a mom, and my son's 7. So I get that. And I get like needing that time or needing that space and whatever that looks like. And I think it's really important because I think kids need to see that.
Yeah, I love that. I know this is something you talked about in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So we know the parents can face challenges like the power struggles,
Yes.
behavioral issues with their
Oh, yeah.
kids. And again, like
Mm-hmm.
I was saying, they are not just learning from you, they're learning from the exterior noise that comes into their life through their
Sure.
friends at school. So, how can parents use these challenges as opportunities for personal growth, right? Both for themselves and their kids and their relationships?
Specifically like power struggles and like behavioral issues.
Yeah, because think about when, like you were saying, you went through the toddler phase and you were having
Yeah.
people say, well, put hot sauce in his mouth if he talks back, put him in a
Yeah.
timeout.
Yeah.
And or you probably even, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've seen it where the parent is yelling to the child to be quiet and the child yells louder to be heard. And then the noise escalates because they're trying to
Yeah.
out yell each other. So that's
Yeah.
really, to me, a power struggle. So
100%.
how can parents use challenges like that? Because again, I agree with you. I think it's brilliant to think that parents should all be sent home with some form of coaching when they become a parent, and at least in the very first couple of years to kind of get them acclimated to understanding and then giving them the tools. But how can they
Yeah.
use those challenges really for personal growth for themselves and in their relationships with their kids?
Mm. So for me, I think the biggest thing that helped me grow truly was connecting the science behind children and understanding that we need to be equitable around that we are not working with an adult. They truly do not have the same brain capacity and development that we have. And so when we're dealing with power struggles, when we're dealing with behavioral issues, the way that you grow as a parent is that you recognize that number one, your authority is actually embedded in your role as a parent. There's, all this chatter, and a lot of people believe that we need to assert that again, going back to what my husband said, like he needs to know who's boss, meaning my son. I would actually push back and say our kids know who's boss. They are literally relying on us for shelter, food, water, clothing. Like we keep them alive. They know who's boss. What they need more of is connection. They need to be seen, heard, and understood. And the way that you grow, the way that you actually blossom a relationship with your child is that you recognize that behavior is literally just the surface of, like, think of an iceberg. You've got the tip of the iceberg, and then underneath that iceberg is the whole world of whatever is underneath there. So when the Titanic hit that tip, it was everything underneath that took that, boat down, right? It's the same with behavior. Behavior is just the tip of the iceberg, but it's everything underneath. So when a child comes home from school, there is an actual science behind why children kind of fall apart at the end of the day. It's because they've been forced to stay regulated, sit in a seat all day, listen, control their impulses a lot of the time. They didn't get enough movement that day. There's a lot that children have to do to go against their natural instincts at school. So when they come home to their safe place, presumably they're safe in their homes, they fall apart. And the parents get the worst of it. And then there's a lot of times fights or power struggles or behavioral issues. And then parents are like, they don't get any bad reports from school. They don't understand why it's always happening at home, but they're angels at school. And I reassure parents that, listen, you're doing something right if your kids are great at school and they're having troubles at home, because it means they feel safe with you, number one, to be their worst self. And number two, this is where they need to learn to mess up so that you can teach them how to regulate their emotions and how to feel. So the way that you grow is that you look at your children and you say, you know what? You're not who you are on your worst day. I'm not who I am on my worst day. And you'll get as many redos as you need in this household to get it right, because I love you. You're worth messing up and getting it wrong a million times because I know you can get it right. And I think that's how you grow, is that you continuously love your kids on their worst days and you give them a million chances. This is what they need. If we keep believing the worst in our children, they are going to believe the worst in themselves. But when you look at your child and you say, you are a good kid and you're having a super hard time, I love you. And I know that you could do better. They believe that. That becomes their inner voice. And, when I look back on my childhood, I was never reinforced when I messed up or made a mistake that I was still a good kid. And so as an adult, for a lot of years, when I would make a mistake in my marriage or in friendships, I would swallow those mistakes whole. And I was bad. I was the worst thing that I had done. Instead of me being able to right size that and say to myself, I made a mistake, but I'm still a good friend, or I made a mistake, but I'm still a good wife. I made a mistake. I'm still a good employee. I'm bad. I'm horrible. I can't believe I did this. And I know that part of that is because my programming as a child was that I was my worst mistake. And so every time my son makes a mistake or he says the wrong thing or is disrespectful, which again, tone is something we could get into a different time, but tone is just an emotional temperature of how somebody's feeling. I say, you want to try that again? Because I know you didn't mean it that way. I know you're having a hard time. You want to try saying that again to me instead of, don't you dare talk to me that way.
Mm-hmm.
You want to try that again? I know you're having a hard time. How much more loving does that feel, right? And then when they make a mistake, when my son, you know what? You're a good kid. You made a bad choice, but you're a great kid. And I know you'll do better next time. What's a different way you could do that next time? Invite them into the conversation. That's how you grow. It feels so good when you walk away from these situations with your children, knowing that you've equipped them with tools rather than just shaming them and making them feel horrible about themselves. Because at the end of the day, what do we want? We want confident, resilient, respectful children. But if we are not instilling confidence, resilience, and respect and treating them with those things, how are they ever going to have that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love that. So I want to shift now the focus because not every woman who listens to the show is going to be a parent yet, or may not become
Of
a parent.
course. Yeah.
So we know personal growth is a continual learning experience. Of course, I think it's a lifelong experience. Once I really dove into self-development, it was something I grew to love. But if you'd asked me that prior to my journey, I would have said, no way. But I know that adopting a mindset of lifelong learning can be really impactful. So how can women, whether they're parents or not, cultivate a mindset of curiosity and growth to enrich their own lives and also inspire those around them?
So I think the biggest thing that you can do is not take anything personally, honestly. And this takes practice. So again, I'm still working on this personally, so I'm certainly not somebody that has mastered this, but I will say that nothing that anybody ever does is about you. And I mean, this is something that I talk about a lot in parenting. It's not about you. It is not that deep with children. It is not personal. It is developmental. And I would say to every woman out there, it's most likely not about you. And even if it is, it's probably none of your business. But that does not mean that your worth has anything to do with what anybody else thinks. And so it's truly more about, why does someone else's maybe opinion of me or perception or what's happening outside of my beliefs about myself impact me this much? And this is something that's been up for me personally a lot lately, because I still find myself sometimes getting wrapped up in why maybe it's another person, this belief that I have and whatever. And so it's actually up for me right now. It's funny that you're asking me this. And so I'm really trying to grapple with that around, what is it about another person's perception that still affects me so deeply? Because I love myself. I know who I am, and I love who I am in my 40s. I actually love who I am in my 40s much more than I did in my 20s and much more than I did in my 30s. I'm very confident in my beliefs and my boundaries and know how I want to be treated and don't have a problem speaking to it. But then if somebody's kind of resistant to that or triggered by it, it hurts. And that hurt for me, I still have to work through. Why does that still hurt so much? And I believe that all of that still roots back to our childhood. I do. I will die on that hill every day. I believe that all of our kind of insecurities and traumas and all of those things we can root back to a situation in our childhood. But at the core of it is truly recognizing that it's not about anyone else but yourself. And so if you can get clear on who you are, what you love, what you believe, and become more settled in that, then I think the less that becomes a weight. And so I will say that although it still is something that I battle it so much less than I used to. And I can process it and let go of it. And I'm aware of it in a way that I wasn't aware of it before. And so now I can go, I don't like that, but okay, I'll sit with it. And then I just kind of can let it go. Whereas before I was like oh God, they don't like me. Oh my God, what can I do? What could I have done? What did I do? And the ruminating on it was really, really a prison for me. And now it's not. It's like I can acknowledge it, process it, and move on from it. And I think that just takes practice and recognizing that, you know what, our worth should not ever be wrapped up in anyone else. And for women especially, I think this is so important because we are conditioned in this society to have our worth be wrapped up in other people's approval. That's all we've ever known, like we're all raised to be sweet and sit there and not speak up. And, if we do have an opinion, we're aggressive. And if, it's like, there's so many mixed messages for women. And I think at the end of the day, you need to take up space and be you. And I really do believe that you attract what you put out. And so as long as you're putting out that love and that kindness and what you believe about yourself, the right people will be attracted back to you. And you'll eventually be surrounding yourself with the people that you love and deserve because that's what you're putting out in the world. And so just keep reminding yourself that you are deserving and that if somebody is treating you a certain way, that's not about you, it's about them.
Yeah. And I think it really just comes back to, like you were saying, I'm a believer too. I believe that everything that is influencing us today and our own behaviors is really based on things that have happened to us in our past. And all the clues are there. So, and I love the fact too, is like, I just know that even it can still hurt today. Like even as much as self-development, that's why I think it's a lifelong journey.
Of course.
No matter how much you grow. And of course you love yourself. I do. I love myself. There's still going to be moments when I'm going to feel hurt maybe by someone's opinion. Mm-hmm. But I know it just goes back to that when we're kids, we want to belong. We want to feel loved. We want to feel safe and secure. And so it just goes back to that. So I am really excited. Thank you so much. I knew I was going to enjoy this conversation today. Thanks so much for spending time and sharing your insights on creating deeper and more connected family relationships. I really admire your approach and how you parent, the parenting journey. I love the idea of a parenting coach for new parents. I think that's important. But I just love that it's a way for us to, the way you talk about parenting helps us not only strengthen ourselves, but our bonds with our kids and supports both personal growth journeys for the children, for the parents. So thank you so much again for being here with me today and sharing your wisdom.
My pleasure. It was so nice to chat with you, Leslie. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Me too. And to our listeners, if you'd like to connect with Jamie directly and learn more about the work that she does, you can find her contact information in the show notes. Remember, every step you take towards your growth journey impacts not just you, but everyone in your life, including the choices that you're making and the actions that you're taking. So really being intentional around that. You have the power to create the life that you desire, one choice at a time, one step at a time. So embrace each moment, each lesson learned, and keep moving forward with intention. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep believing, and keep designing your extraordinary life one day at a time. Thank you for joining me on Her Extraordinary Life by Design. I hope you've been inspired and empowered by the incredible stories shared on this show. If you enjoyed this episode and the conversations we've had, I would greatly appreciate if you could take a moment to leave a review. Your feedback and support mean the world to me, and it will help others discover the podcast and join our empowering community. Remember to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Together, we can continue to learn from these amazing women, uncover their extraordinary journeys, and be motivated to create our own lives by design. Thank you again for tuning in. Until next time, stay empowered and keep shaping your extraordinary life one day at a time.
Hey, heard you like podcasts. Well, check out Dollar Bets. Two sports guys with faces for radio, betting live money against each other on air. That's Dollar Bets with a Z. Find us on the Winner's Edge.
Hey guys, it's It's Miriam Love here, and I want to share something very special with you. Check out my new release, All In, the Spanish remixes, out now on Electric House Records. And always remember, be love, share love, all love.
Available now wherever you listen to music.
Electricast.